Understand.
Refugees.
You shall not pass.
Stand.
You shall not pass.
The European Union repels asylum seekers from Turkey
The European Union repels asylum seekers from Turkey
with brute force.
with the brute force. The European Union repels asylum seekers from Turkey with brute force.
Why?
When President Recep Tayyip Erdogan
When President Recep Tayyip Erdogan
announced on February 28th
announced on February 28th
that his government would no longer stop refugees
that his government would no longer stop refugees
from crossing into Greece, Nabila's parents packed her and her 5 siblings onto a bus,
Nabila's parents packed her and her five siblings onto a bus,
left their house in the Turkish town of Tokat,
left her home in the Turkish town of Tokat,
and headed west.
When President Recep Tayyip Erdogan announced on February 28 that his government would no longer stop refugees from crossing into Greece, Nabila's parents packed her and her 5 siblings onto a bus, left their house in the Turkish town of Toka and headed west.
The 12-year-old Afghan refugee had no chance to say goodbye to her Turkish classmates.
The 12-year-old Afghan refugee had no chance to say goodbye to her Turkish classmates.
She should eat bushes. Why?
No one bothered to tell Nabila and her family
No one bothered to tell Abida and her family
that the Greek side of the border would be closed.
No one bothered to tell Nabila and her family that the Greek side of the border would be closed.
So they and dozens of other migrants have spent the past 5 days
Migrants have spent the past 5 days
in a field on the banks of the Maritsa River,
in a field on the banks of Maritsa River,
which separates the two countries,
with
armed Greek guards on the far side.
with the armed Greek guards on the far side. So Nabila, they and dozens of refugees, other migrants, have spent the past 5 days in a field on the bank of Maritsa River, which separates the two countries, with armed Greek guards on the far side.
We have to keep waiting for the border to open, says Nabila, translating for her father. She learned fluent Turkish at school.
We have to keep waiting for the border to open, says Nabila, translating for her father. She learned fluent Turkish at school. 죽겠네, 돌려서.
We have no money to go back. Nabila and the tens of thousands of other migrants who took up Mr. Erdogan's empty promise of free passage to Europe are now trapped in an international standoff.
Nabila and the tens of thousands of migrants are the migrants who took up Mr. Erdogan's empty promise of the free passage to Europe are now trapped in an international standoff.
Turkey is home to 3.6 million refugees
Turkey is home to 3.6 million refugees
from the war in Syria. And polls show most Turks want them to leave.
And poll shows most Turks want them to leave. Turkey is home to 3.6 million refugees from the war in Syria, and polls show most Turks want them to leave.
Turkey says it opened the border to Greece.
Turkey says it opened the border to Greek. What? To Greece?
In the face of an imminent influx
In the face of an imminent
of
influx
another 1 million refugees
of another 1 million refugees
from bloody fighting in Idlib.
from bloody fighting in Idlib. Turkey says it opened the border in the face of an imminent influx of another 1 million refugees from the bloody fighting in Idlib.
More likely, it wants to divert attention from its military problems there.
More importantly, it wants to divert attention from its military problems there.
In response, Greece began forcibly turning back migrants.
In response, Greece began forcibly turning back migrants.
It sent riot police, armored vehicles,
In response, Greece began forcibly turning back migrants.
It sent riot police,
It sent riot police,
armored vehicles,
armored vehicles,
and 1,000 soldiers to the border,
and 1,000 soldiers to the border,
and suspended the right to apply for asylum
and suspended the right to apply for asylum
for a month.
for a month. It sent riot police, armored vehicles, and 1,000 soldiers to the border, and suspended the right to apply for asylum for a month.
The European Union rushed to Greece's aid.
The European Union rushed to Greece's aid. The European Union rushed to Greece's aid.
After a visit to the border on March 3rd,
After a visit to the border on March 3rd,
Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission,
Ursula, the President of the European Commission,
promised 700 million euros, that's $780 million,
promised 700 million euros, that is 780 US dollars,
million euros, that's $780 million,
$1 million
in emergency assistance,
in emergency assistance,
along with 7 vessels, 2 helicopters,
along with the 7 vessels, 2 helicopters,
a plane, and extra guards
a plane, and extra guards
from Frontex, the
from
EU border
from
agency.
for the EU border agency. After a visit to the border on March 3rd, Ursula, the President of the European Commission, promised 700 million euros, that is $80 million in emergency assistance, along with the 7 vessels, 2 helicopters, a plane, and extra guards from Frontex, the EU border agency.
European foreign ministers will meet on March 6th
European foreign ministers will meet on March 6th
to discuss further measures.
European foreign ministers will meet on March 6th to discuss further measures.
Turkey and the EU are stuck in an uneasy bargain
Turkey and EU are stuck in an uneasy bargain
over refugees.
EU and Turkey are stuck in an uneasy bargain over refugees.
After more than 1 million migrants entered Europe from Turkey
After more than 1 million migrants entered Europe from Turkey
in 2015 to 16,
in 2015 to 16,
the two sides came to a deal.
the two sides came to a deal. After more than 1 million refugees came to Europe from Turkey in 2015 and 2016, the two sides signed the deal. Come to a deal.
The EU offered Turkey 6 billion euros in aid
The EU offered Turkey 6 billion euros in aid
for refugees.
for refugees. The EU offered $6 billion in aid for refugees.
Turkey promised to do whatever it could to prevent them from leaving
Turkey promised to do whatever it could do to prevent them from leaving
and to take back any migrants who reach Greece
and take back any migrants who would reach Greece,
but had their applications for refugee status rejected.
for refugee status rejected. Turkey promised to do whatever it could to stop them from leaving and to take back any migrants, but who reached Greece, but had their applications for refugee status rejected.
But the aid ran out at the end of last year.
But the aid ran out at the end of last year.
Mr. Erdogan says he turned down an offer of
Mr. Erdogan said he turned down an offer
another 1 billion euros
of another 1 billion euros
as insufficient.
as insufficient.
The EU denies making the offer.
The EU denies making the offer. Mr. Erdogan says he turned down an offer of another 1 billion euros as insufficient. The EU denies making the offer.
Since the deal was first signed,
Since the deal was first signed,
Mr. Erdogan has often threatened to let migrants stream into Europe again.
Mr. Erdogan often threatened to let migrants stream into Europe again. After the deal was signed, Mr. Erdogan has often threatened to let migrants stream into Europe again.
On February 29th, there's more than 10,000 people
As on February 29th, as more than 10,000 people
stepped off buses
stepped off buses
and passed through a Turkish checkpoint
and passed through a Turkish checkpoint
near the town of Edirne.
It
It looked as if our nightmare scenario was coming true.
looked as if our nightmare scenario was coming true,
Said a Greek diplomat.
On February 29th, as more than 1,000 people stepped off buses and passed through a Turkish checkpoint near the town of Edirne, it looked as if our nightmare scenario was coming true, says the Greek diplomat.
Greek border guards blocked the migrants
Greek border guards blocked the migrants
who became trapped between the checkpoints.
The Greek border guards blocked the migrants who became trapped between the checkpoints.
On March 2nd, police fired tear gas on the crowd,
On March 2nd, police fired tear gas on the crowd,
and the Greek military staged an exercise nearby
and Greek what? And the Greek military staged exercise nearby
using live artillery.
On March 2nd, police fired tear gas on the crowd, and the Greek military staged an exercise nearby with live artillery, using live artillery.
Intimidated, some migrants have begun returning to Turkey.
Some migrants have begun returning to Turkey.
The other main route into Greece
The other main route into
has been via inflatable dinghy returning to Turkey. The other main route into Greece has been via inflatable dinghy to Lesbos and
Okay.
The other main route to Greece has been via inflatable dinghy to Lesbos,
island just 5 miles, that's 8 kilometers
an island just 5 miles, that's 8 kilometers
off the Turkish coast.
off the Turkish coast. The other main route to Greece has been via inflatable dinghy to Lesbos, an island just 5 miles, that is 8 kilometers off the coast of Turkey.
The number of migrants rose there too,
The number of migrants rose there too,
with some 1,200 arriving on March 1st and 2nd alone.
with some 1,200 arriving on March 1st and 2nd alone. The number of migrants rose too, with some 1,200 migrants arriving on March 1st and 2nd alone.
But the island is already overcrowded.
but the island is already overcrowded.
with migrants, including 19,000 in a camp built for 3,000. And
With the migrants, including 19,000 in a camp built for 3,000,
locals have grown weary of the burden.
and locals have grown weary of the burden. But the island is already overcrowded with the migrants, including 19,000 in a camp built for 3,000, and locals have grown weary of the burden.
Some migrants say their boats have been attacked by unidentified men
Some migrants say their boats have been attacked by unidentified men
who push them back towards Turkey.
who pushed them back towards Turkey. Some migrants say their boats have been attacked by unidentified men who pushed their boats, who pushed them back towards Turkey.
A small boy drowned on March 2nd
A small boy drowned on March 2nd
when a dinghy capsized.
when the dinghy capsized. A small boy drowned on March 2nd when the dinghy capsized.
The Greek Coast Guard rescued the others.
The Greek Coast Guard rescued the others.
Greece's tough response has forestalled another crisis
The Greece's tough response has forestalled another crisis
like that of 2015.
like that of 2015.
The numbers remain tiny,
The number remains tiny,
and it has the support of the EU.
and it has the support of the EU. Greece's tough response has forestalled another crisis like that of 2015, though the numbers remain tiny, and it has the support of the EU.
But its suspension of the right to apply for asylum
But the suspension of the right to apply for asylum
violates international and European law.
violates international and European law, but its suspension of the right to apply for asylum violates international and European law.
The International Convention on Refugees bars countries
The International Convention on Refugees bars countries
from turning away people
from turning away people
seeking asylum,
seeking asylum,
a practice known as refoulement.
a practice known as the refoulement. The International Convention on Refugees bars countries from turning away people seeking asylum. Practice known as refoulement.
The minimum that a state has to do
The minimum a state has to do
is to check whether those who come to its border
is to check whether those who've come to its border
have a right to refugee status.
have a right to refugee status.
And you can't do that
But you can't do that.
if you're keeping them at a distance with tear gas.
You can do that if you're keeping them at a distance with tear gas. The minimum that a state can do, has to do, is to check whether those who come to its borders have the right to have a right to refugee status, and you can do that if you're keeping them at a distance with the right tear gas.
Says Hannah Behrens of the Migration Policy Institute Europe, a think tank in Brussels. Greece has invoked an article of the EU treaty that
Greece has invoked an article of the EU treaty
allows emergency measures
that allows emergency measures
when a state is overwhelmed by migrants.
when a state is overwhelmed by migrants. Greece has invoked an article of the EU treaty that allows emergency measures when a state is overwhelmed by migrants.
But that does not include suspending asylum.
But that does not include the suspending asylum.
According to UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency,
According to UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, but that does not include the suspending asylum. Suspending asylum, according to UNHCR, the UN's agency. 금방 할게. 뭐 하고 있냐 벌써? Can you guys do that?
Very easy.
I'm so sorry. These days I'm so into something I have to do
Oh, that's fine. We understand.
and try to save. We have another one here. I guess one smaller and one bigger one should be okay.
How about
Gerald Knaus, an expert who helped design the EU
General Knall, an expert who helped design the EU,
Turkey Migration Pact,
helped design the EU-Turkey Migration Pact,
says the suspension threatens the very existence of
says that the suspension threatens the very existence
the right to asylum
of the right to asylum
and accuses the EU of implementing Trump-style policies.
and accuses the EU of implementing Trump-style policies. Jared Connors, an expert that helped design the EU-Turkey Migration Pact, says the suspension threatens the very existence of the right to asylum and accuses the EU of implementing Trump-style policies.
Harsh words for Greece's newish Prime Minister
Harsh words for Greece's newish Prime Minister,
Kyriakos Mitsotakis
Kyriakos Mitsotakis.
to hear.
Harsh words for Greece's newish Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, to hear.
A durable solution will require more people,
A durable solution will require more people,
presumably to be paid for by Europe as a whole,
presumably to be paid for by Europe as a whole,
to process asylum applications in Greece.
to process asylum applications in Greece. A durable solution will require more people, presumably to be paid for by Europe as a whole, to process applications, asylum applications in Greece.
So that the EU is less vulnerable to extortion.
So the EU is less vulnerable to extortion.
It will also require a new deal with Turkey.
It also require a new deal with Turkey.
Some EU foreign ministers support a no-fly zone in Idlib.
Some EU foreign ministers support a no-fly zone in Idlib
As part of an effort to prevent the refugee flood,
as a part of an effort to prevent refugee flood. 네, 장모님.
Turkey fears. There has been less talk of more generous aid to
There has been less talk of more generous aid.
Turkey that is unpopular with European voters
That is unpopular with European voters
who tend to dislike the autocratic Mr. Erdogan.
who tend to dislike autocratic the autocratic Mr. Erdogan.
저희 학교 못 가서 약간 지루하긴 해요. 우리 학교 못 가서
In the meantime, Greece and Europe are relying on deterrence.
In the meantime, Greece and Europe are relying on deterrence.
Turkey claims that 130,000 refugees have already headed for Greece,
Turkey claimed that 130,000 refugees have already headed for Greece,
a wildly inflated figure
a widely inflated figure.
aimed at satisfying domestic anti-refugee pressure.
The aim to satisfy domestic anti-refugee pressure.
Most of them are not Syrians,
Most of them are not Syrians,
but Afghans and others.
but Afghans and others.
No one knows the real numbers, nor how many have made it across.
No one knows the real number, nor how many have made it across.
Those who have and were caught
Those who have and are caught
return with harrowing stories.
return with the harrowing stories.
Ali Kojar, an Afghan teenager, Ali Kojar, and harrowing stories. Ali Kojar, an Afghan teenager,
Aliko Jar, an Afghan teenager,
says he crossed the river 4 times,
says that he crossed the river 4 times,
once by swimming and 3 times by boat.
once by swimming and 3 times by boat.
He says the Greek police took his phone
He says the Greek police took his phone,
identity papers, and
identity papers, and
clothes and sent him back in his underwear.
sent him back in his underwear.
Others say they were beaten or tasered.
Others said they were beaten or tasered.
On March 4th,
On March 4th,
migrants and Turkish authorities
migrants and Turkish authorities
reported that Greek police
had fired on a group
crossing near the town of Parzakula,
crossing near the town of Parzakula.
killing 1 and wounding 5.
네, 장-
Did it.
The Greek government denied it.
Greece may be avoiding another migrant crisis,
Greece may be avoiding another migrant crisis,
but it risks plunging Europe into a crisis of conscience.
but it risks plunging Europe into a crisis of conscience.